We started talking last week about the Israelites and their failure to run out and to completely take care of the inhabitants of the Promised Land. And when you go to the book of Joshua, you find that the instruction to Joshua immediately in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. And you see other places in Joshua where there is this reference to this, and we'll look at some of those in just a moment. But Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, the Israelites are going to be entering into the Promised Land. Joshua is their new leader, and the command is given to Joshua. The encouragement is given to him. Notice verses 1 through 5. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Then he gives him the first of this, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all that the law of Moses, my servant, commanded you to do. Do not turn from the right to the left, and so forth. Now, there's the beginning of this command to go into the land. And in the book of Deuteronomy, there was this continual reference to when you go into the land, one of the things that you're going to need to do is to cleanse that land. There seems to be some reference, and we really don't have time to go there exactly, but there seems to be some reference to the idea that the inhabitants of the land are squatters anyway, that they don't belong there. This is the Promised Land. This is God's land for the Israelites. And so the Philistines and all of those, the Canaanites, all those that are there are squatters. This is the Lord's land. The Lord has already promised this to Abraham. He's already promised it to his offspring, to the children of Israel. So it is a matter of you go in, you take the land, and you wipe this land clean of all of the evil that's in the land. So look at Deuteronomy chapter 7. So back up to Deuteronomy. And what has happened is that the Israelites have made that 40 years of wandering, and that generation has died, and they come to the door of the Promised Land again. They come to this entrance to the Promised Land. This time they are on the eastern side of the Jordan River. They'll be crossing that Jordan River and entering into the Promised Land to take it. So what Moses does, as the book of Deuteronomy records, is to restate the law, give the new generation the law again. It's not a new law, it's a restating of the law. So that's what Moses is doing. So in Deuteronomy, you have several references to this going in and taking the land. The first one is in Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 through 6. Notice those verses. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, I guess that's Girgashites, and the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mightier than yourselves. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking the daughters for your sons, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars, dash to pieces their pillars, and chop down their Asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are in the face of the earth, on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all the people. I actually probably should have stopped back about verse 6 or 5, but the command is given. These people are going to be dedicated to the Lord. You shall wipe them off the face of the earth. And then he gives the reason that this needs to happen. He gives at least one of the reasons. The explanation is made in those verses that we just read, because he says, these things will cause you to be drawn away. For when you intermarry, this would turn away your sons from following after me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled. So the complete destruction is not just of the people, but it's of all their altars, all their gods, burn their gods, just totally annihilate and get rid of everything that even shows that they were ever there. And the reason that he gives here in these verses seems to be very clear, and that is that because they will turn my people away from me. They will turn my people away from me and to other gods. You shall not make any covenant and show no mercy to them. So there's the first, at least the first one I found as I was looking at this in the book of Deuteronomy, that Moses really highlights this idea that when you go into the land, there are some things that you need to do. And one of those things that you need to do is to completely take care of those inhabitants of the land that you're going in to take possession of, clear the land, clear the nations. He names them, he names the 7. And he says, the Lord's going to give them over to you. You will defeat them, and you must devote them to complete destruction. Now, any observations that you'd like to make as we think about the command that God gives the people when they enter the land and how that relates to the inhabitants of the land? What we're highlighting is that they didn't do this. They didn't do what God commanded, and it did not go well with them because of that. Observations?
You don't have to go very far to see that intermarrying start having that influence. I mean, it's even in the book of Judges with Samson.
Mm-hmm.
It's right after they go into the land.
It does, yeah. The idea that's mentioned here of intermarrying, Gary says, you don't have to go very far into the history of Israel to see the danger and the result of that. And just he referred to Samson and his intermarrying there. Note that he gives them this warning, and really the thread that connects this to what we've been studying is that this is going to result in judgment by God. This is going to be something that is going to cause them to not just fail, or not just to it's not just they didn't do something God said do. The consequences go far and wide because they didn't do what God said do. And those consequences are the people are there, the enemies are there, the heathen is there, the idol worshipers are there, their idols are there, the false gods, the representations of those false gods are there, their places of worship are there, and they remain there. And as a result of that, then you have the Israelites being pulled away into that, and the Lord's anger burns. That's what he says here. When all of this happens, then the Lord's anger will burn against you. Middle of verse 4, I think. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. Did they miss that part of Moses' sermon? Did y'all fall asleep in that part of the sermon? Destroy your enemy. And here's why. And if you don't, here's the result. Pretty clear, isn't it? Okay, look at chapter 9 of Deuteronomy. Chapter 9, beginning in verse 1, and we'll look at verses 1 through 5 here as well. Hear, O Israel, you are to cross over the Jordan today to go to dispossess nations greater and mightier than yourselves, cities great and fortified up to the heavens, a people great and tall, the sons of Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Know therefore today that he who goes over before you as a consuming fire is the Lord your God. He will destroy them and subdue them before you, so you shall drive them out and make them perish quickly, as the Lord has promised you. Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me in to possess the land, whereas it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. Not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. Now, the sermon of Moses continues, and Moses tells this new generation of Israelites, you have heard the story from your forefathers that said, that's a great people in there. The cities are walled, the people are giants, and you've heard the stories about all of those. And yet, what he says is, note, you're going to dispossess, you're going to throw them out, you're going to take over the nations that are greater and mightier than you are. Did you notice he said that? There's no doubt about it. They are greater and mightier than you are. But you're going to take over. You're going to depose them. You're going to run them out of town. You're going to take over completely. Even though their cities are great, they are fortified, they're up to the heaven, their people are tall, they are sons of Anak, and you've heard it said, who can stand before them? We can't do it. Therefore, today I want you to know that the Lord that goes before you is a consuming fire. And really what he says is, Moses says, the one that's going to win the battle against these nations that are greater and mightier than you is the Lord, not you. The Lord's the one that's going to win these battles. The Lord is the one that's going to be the victorious one. He will destroy them. He will subdue them. Verse 3. And then you shall drive them out and make them perish quickly, as the Lord promised. So there's another section that Moses says in this final sermon to this generation that grew up in the wilderness wanderings, this is what has to happen. This is what's going to happen. And some very strong highlights are that it's pretty obvious when you look at those nations, they are mightier than you are. It's obvious that they're great, that they're mighty, that their cities are walled, that they are giants, that they are warriors, but that doesn't matter. I am a consuming fire, and I am going to give you the victory. Then you drive them out and annihilate them completely. All right, that's pretty strong there. And boy, you follow that up with what we just read from chapter 7, you put both of those together, and you wonder how in the world they didn't get the message. Observations you'd like to make at this point. Anything?
I guess 40 years wandering around the desert Golden for some reason.
Yeah, the stories that they heard during the wilderness wandering, I guess they may have gotten part of it.
If that generation didn't see the golden calf, that they didn't see what their forefathers had come back of the word that the land was theirs to take. They weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
They just heard all these stories.
Mm-hmm.
They were just stories. And they believed the stories more than they believed God.
So now Moses is, by the very hand of God, delivering this final message to them and making it very clear. Chapter 12, he goes at it again. Chapter 12. Yes.
The next few verses in verse 9, in chapter 9 are pretty telling too, because he emphasizes, don't for 1 second think that you're getting this land because you're some kind of great people or righteous people. Remember how rebellious and stubborn you've been from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really physical picture of what Paul says in the New Testament to us about salvation being by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. And that doesn't negate obedience, but it just says that before you get arrogant and self-righteous, Christ died for you while you were yet a sinner.
Yes.
And this salvation, this gift that's given to you, is just like God gave this people the promised land. You don't deserve it. You didn't earn it. Don't think for 1 second that somehow it's given to you because you're wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. That's very clear. And Gary's point is well made that he emphasizes later on in chapter 9. And I think even in chapter 7, there's some reference to that. This is not because of your righteousness that this is happening. It's not going to be given. Yeah.
In chapter 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chapter 9, he really goes deep into it there to give it extra emphasis. It's not because of your uprightness that any of this is happening.
Moses changed Joshua's name from Shia, which meant salvation, to Joshua, which means Yahweh saves. And I think that has something to do with what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not to look to any man to accomplish this. There's certainly no man that can make this happen, except to the point where God says, "I'm giving it to you. When you get possession of it, then it's up to you to then cleanse this land because it needs to be cleansed." All right, good observations. Chapter 12 is another place, verses 1 through 4. These are the statutes and rules that you shall be careful to do in the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. You shall surely destroy all the places where the nations whom you shall dispossess serve their gods on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. You shall tear down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and burn their Asherim with fire. You shall chop down the carved images of their gods and destroy their name out of the place. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, but you shall seek the place that the Lord your God will choose out of all your tribes to put his name and to make his habitation there. There you shall go. Now, we'll stop right there. By the way, I've read through Deuteronomy several times, but I think doing this is the first time I ever noticed how many times Moses repeated himself. So I guess that's scriptural. We can do that in a sermon. We can repeat ourselves. He really drives it home. Here we have another place in chapter 12 where he gives them instruction to totally wipe out the evidence of their idolatry. Take care of it. Totally wipe it out. Totally take care of all that has anything to do with their idolatry. It is not the way that you are to worship your God, so that it's not only of no use, but we don't need a reminder of it. We don't need any remembrance of it whatsoever. You chop it down, you dash to pieces, you burn, you do whatever is necessary to take care of all of those things. And this, he says, reminding them in the first couple of verses that this is what you're going to do when you enter in to possess the land that the Lord's giving you. Emphasizing that again in chapter 12. Okay? Any comments? All right, go all the way to chapter 20. Chapter 20. Moses talked to them about war. He talked to them about when they see horses and chariots and giants and armies that are bigger than them, and it makes your liver quiver. Here's what he says. When you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. That's just one verse. When you go up against an army, they are loaded. It's obvious you can't stand against them. It is obvious that if you were to attack with your limited abilities and your limited resources, that you'd be killed pretty quickly. But he says, don't be afraid. The Lord your God is with you. And then Moses reminds them who that is. It is that God that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. That same one. Again, I'll just refer to what Gary brought up a while ago. Was it anything that the Israelites did that got them rescued from Egypt? Absolutely nothing. One of the reasons, very likely from my perspective, that God did exactly as He did it was to prove that whatever happened, happened because that was what God wanted to happen. God's hand was the reason that this happened. And He reminds them that I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, and that's why you shouldn't be afraid when you come against an army. I took care of the greatest army on the face of the earth with one swipe of Moses' staff. That's pretty clear. Skip down to verses 16 and 17, maybe 16 through 18. Verse 16 beginning. But in the city of these peoples that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance, you shall save alive nothing that breathes, but you shall devote them to complete destruction. The Hittites and the Amorites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded, that they may not teach you to do according to all their abominable practices that they have done for their gods, and so you sin against the Lord your God. Again, he says, you completely wipe them out, and here's why. Here's the reason. So there's no mistaking why God wants this to happen. They are abominable in their practices, and if they hang around as your neighbors, they will teach you those abominable practices. God knows His people, doesn't He? Yes. Everything, yeah.
It's sort of a recurring thing with the children of Israel. I mean, it happened again with Saul. He said they were to kill everything. Hey, those look pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll eat some of those.
I like those sheep, yeah. Yeah.
They didn't, even after we told them face to face.
Yeah.
Still didn't do it.
I don't know what Saul was thinking, if he thought, well, I don't want to get in his head, but he rationalized, I guess, just as the children of Israel did here, that, well, it won't hurt. We won't let that happen, or we'll be different, something like that.
Well, he's human. That's
Oh,
what we do.
yes, we do.
We do it every day.
We certainly do. We know better. I don't have to follow that because I can do it. I can handle it. One more, 25, chapter 25 in Deuteronomy. I would say this is not an exhaustive list. If you want to go back through Deuteronomy and see if you can find some more, do that, because I was just really impressed by all the ones that I found that were so much, that were repeating God's rules, repeating what He wanted them to do. Chapter 25, verse 17, I think, is where we need to start. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you, and he did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. Another one of those, blot out the memory or totally annihilate or do whatever is necessary for making sure that there is no influence of these heathen nations left in the land that God had promised. By the way, he reminded them again in this passage that this is the land that the Lord your God is giving you. I'm not sure how many times he tells them that in Deuteronomy. I don't know how many times he tells them that throughout Scripture, but he tells them an awful lot. Let me remind you that this is the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Again, not something that you're going to earn or do for yourself, except in limited scope, what I ask you to do, what I tell you to do. I referred to 3 passages last week in Joshua that referred to that fact that they did not wipe them out. They didn't drive them out. Joshua 15, 16, and 17. There are three chapters there that have verses in them that refer to that. The Lord had commanded them to drive out, to establish a new order of things, to make sure that the inhabitants of the land and their abominable practices were no longer present. That's what he said. And they did not do that. The Canaanites continued to presence, and those verses specifically refer to that as well as others. So I'm just going to refer you to those that I looked at last week. There are several passages in the book of Joshua that would remind us of the results of this. Wait a minute, before I get into that, I just jotted down a couple of things. In what we've already read, what would you say is the reason that God wanted Israel to totally cleanse the land of all of these heathens, all of these idol worshipers? Why would you say, according to the scripture that we've read, the explanation that Moses has given through the Lord, why would you say that the Lord wanted these people gone? To remove temptation. And what specific temptation does he mention? Yeah, worshiping the false gods. Is that what you said, John? Okay.
Because we already know they have a proclivity to do that anyway, without anybody's outside.
Well, you put two and two together, didn't you? Yeah. They, Gary, very straightforward. We know they already have this tendency. So there's the connection back to the golden calf. Okay, there's that connection. So the Israelites and their culture, God didn't want them to coexist with these heathens in the land. He didn't want that. And one of the things that he specifically said was that they will teach you their, English Standard says, abominable ways. You may have some other translations that say differently, but I think abominable is a pretty good word there. They will teach you their ways. You will intermarry with them if you leave them there. And there is the danger then that they're going to not just teach you their ways, but they're going to pull you in, and your family is going to be drawn into this. So when you have this foreign partner, therein, I think, lies a whole different set of difficult circumstances. So as we see through our research and looking at what took place, the Israelites but the Israelites allowed their humanity, their human thinking, their selfishness, or believing they were better than God or knew more than God. I'm not sure exactly how they were thinking as they allowed them. I think one author called it clemency. I'm not sure if that's it or not. But how did they allow this to occur? But one of the things we know is that as long as there were pockets of idolatry, and as long as there were those there that were their neighbors that were teaching these false doctrines, worshiping the idols, and as long as that was there, the Israelites were subject to following that. And we've already looked, I think, in great detail about this reasoning that God gave Israel about how and why you need to get rid of these people and their idols. I think it appears just through the verses that we read here in Deuteronomy that the stamping out of these pagan religions wasn't just simply the stopping of those who were worshiping something other than God. It's not just that, because what we find that in these pagan religions, it involves some really horrible things. When you're going to offer a child as a sacrifice, or if you're going to allow any form of child abuse, if you're going to allow prostitution at your temple, if you're going to allow the cutting of the flesh in a ritual form where you believe that I'm going to get closer to my God by cutting the flesh or doing something really off the wall like that. You see what we're dealing with? We're not just dealing with, oh, this is just somebody over there minding their own business and worshiping a God that happens not to be the one true living God. They are involved in all kinds of corruptness and immorality that from our perspective is really, really troubling. And we read through where the Israelites actually became involved in a lot of this as well. I mean, pretty serious mess is what it is. Pretty serious stuff. So the instruction might sound, they're worshiping a different God. Let's just leave them alone over there. It's no big deal. Let's leave them alone. But that's not it. It included some really heinous and detestable things in most cases. All right, any observations? I got one more point if I have time. Anything?
It doesn't take them long, even after they get in there, that they fall from grace. After Jericho is on, the things that they do there, that just, they go, getting started.
It doesn't take long. That's John's point. It really doesn't take long at all. And the problem is, it hangs around. It never really leaves until they're taken into captivity. Now, one of the reasons God was so strong about this, and one of the reasons that Moses is given this instruction by God in this delivery of Deuteronomy, and he repeats himself over and over and over, is God looks down the line. He looks in the future. He sees how it's going to be, how it's going to go in the future, and he sees how that's going to dominate the children of Israel and result in their downfall in so many different ways. And he's trying to let them see how serious this matter really is. But they just don't really get it. All right, look at Amos chapter 3. Let me close with this point. Amos chapter 3. The prophet Amos chapter 3. Hear the word that the Lord has spoken against you, O people of Israel, against the whole family that I brought up out of the land of Egypt. You only have I known of all of the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. I love you. I have chosen you. I have made you my people. I have sacrificed for you. I have delivered you. I have given you instruction. I have been patient with you. I told you the rules. You didn't follow them. I have now reached a point where you will experience my wrath. Because I love you, I will punish you for all of your iniquities. All right. Thank y'all for your comments. Appreciate it very much.